The 3:17 a.m. phone call that changed everything started with 7 words that still make my blood run cold. Margaret fell and can't get up. My vibrant 72-year-old neighbor, the woman who power walked every morning and tended the most beautiful garden on our block, was now facing the terrifying reality that one slip in her kitchen might have stolen her independence forever. But what the emergency room doctor told us next shattered everything I thought I knew about aging. Her bones are fine. The real problem is muscle weakness. She simply didn't have the strength to catch herself. That's when I realized with stomach-dropping clarity that Margaret and I had been living identical lives, making the same devastating nutritional mistakes that are quietly destroying the strength of millions of Americans over 60. The protein source we'd both trusted for decades was actually starving our muscles. And there are 10 foods sitting in every grocery store that contain up to 6 times more muscle-building power than anything we'd ever considered. The phone call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. My daughter Sarah's voice was shaking as she told me that my 72-year-old neighbor, Margaret, had fallen in her kitchen and broken her hip. Margaret, the same woman who used to power walk 3 miles every morning, who tended the most beautiful rose garden on our block, who never missed her weekly bridge game. Now she was lying in a hospital bed, facing months of rehabilitation and the terrifying possibility that she might never live independently again. What haunted me wasn't just the fall itself. It was what the emergency room doctor told Sarah when she arrived at the hospital. "Your neighbor's bone density is actually quite good for her age," he said, reviewing Margaret's x-rays. "The real problem is muscle weakness. She simply didn't have the strength to catch herself." Those words hit me like a physical blow because I realized something horrifying. Margaret and I have been living parallel lives. Same morning routine, same grocery store, same misguided confidence in our daily eggs and toast breakfast. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about my own wobbly moments getting up from low chairs, the way I'd started gripping handrails a little tighter, the subtle but undeniable truth that my body wasn't responding the way it used to. At 68, I've been telling myself these were just normal signs of aging. But Margaret's fall forced me to confront a terrifying question. Was I next? The next morning, I called Dr. Martinez's office and demanded an emergency appointment. When I walked into his familiar exam room, I didn't wait for pleasantries. "I need to know if I'm going to end up like Margaret," I said, my voice barely steady. "I need to know if I'm losing muscle mass, and I need to know what I can do about it before it's too late." What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about aging, nutrition, and my own future. Dr. Martinez didn't just order blood tests or examine my reflexes. Instead, he asked me one simple question that shattered 40 years of breakfast habits. "Janet, tell me exactly what you eat for protein every day, and I'll tell you whether you're building strength or watching it slip away." I felt so confident listing my daily eggs, my occasional chicken breast, my slice of cheese. But as I spoke, I watched his expression grow more concerned. When I finished, he leaned forward and said something that still gives me chills. "Janet, based on what you just told me, your body has been in a state of slow-motion muscle breakdown for years. You're not eating protein. You're eating the illusion of protein. And there are foods sitting in your regular grocery store right now that contain 4 times, 5 times, even 6 times more usable protein than anything you just mentioned." Thanks for joining us here on Voice of Age, a warm space for real talk about life, health, and heart in our later years. That afternoon, Dr. Martinez handed me a list that would completely transform my understanding of nutrition and aging. 10 foods that deliver more protein than eggs, ranked from the surprisingly accessible to the absolutely extraordinary. But this wasn't just about numbers on a nutrition label. He showed me research revealing that Americans over 60 are experiencing an epidemic of preventable muscle loss, leading to 36 million falls annually and over $50 billion in medical costs. More heartbreaking still, many of these falls aren't accidents. They're the predictable result of bodies that have been quietly starving for the right kind of protein. The most shocking revelation came when he explained that the food industry has spent decades promoting eggs as the perfect protein, while completely ignoring foods that are nutritionally superior in every measurable way. Some of these foods have been staples in other cultures for centuries, supporting healthy, aging populations around the world. Yet here in America, we walk past them in every grocery store, never knowing they could be the difference between independence and dependence in our later years. As I left his office that day, clutching that life-changing list, I made a promise to myself and to Margaret, still fighting her way through physical therapy. I would not just learn about these foods. I would test them, master them, and share what I discovered with anyone who would listen. Because if a simple breakfast change could be the difference between catching yourself when you stumble and ending up in a hospital bed, then every American over 60 deserves to know this information. If you're ready to discover these 10 protein powerhouses that could transform your strength and independence, please subscribe to our channel right now. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating content that could literally save lives and preserve the dignity of aging in America. Because what I'm about to share isn't just nutrition advice, it's a blueprint for taking control of your future one meal at a time. The truth Dr. Martinez shared with me that day wasn't just about protein numbers. It was about a fundamental deception that's been quietly destroying the health of millions of Americans over 60. For decades, we've been following nutrition guidelines that were never designed for aging bodies. Guidelines that have created what researchers are now calling a silent epidemic of muscle wasting in our most vulnerable population. Here's what shook me to my core. The protein recommendation that most of us grew up with, 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, was calculated for healthy 25-year-olds. After 60, your body doesn't just need more protein, it needs dramatically more. Current research from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition shows that maintaining muscle mass after 60 requires between 1.2 and 1.6 grams per kilogram daily. For a 150-pound person, that's not the 55 grams we've been told. It's closer to 85 grams of high-quality protein every single day. But here's where the deception gets even deeper. The food industry has spent billions convincing us that quantity equals quality, that any protein will do. They've sold us the myth that a gram of protein from eggs is identical to a gram from any other source. This is dangerously false. Your aging body can only rebuild muscle with complete proteins, those containing all 9 essential amino acids in proportions your cells can actually use. Most foods we consider high protein are nutritionally incomplete, leaving your muscles starving even when you think you're feeding them well. The real game changer is something called leucine, an amino acid that acts like a master switch for muscle protein synthesis. Without adequate leucine, your body simply cannot trigger the rebuilding process, no matter how much protein you consume. Research from the University of Arkansas reveals that most adults over 60 need at least 2.5 grams of leucine per meal to activate this crucial mechanism. Those 2 eggs you've been counting on, they provide barely 1.6 grams, not even enough to flip the switch. What's even more devastating is the timing factor that nobody talks about. Your aging body processes protein differently than it did in your youth. The anabolic window, the period when your muscles can effectively use protein for repair, becomes narrower and more selective. This means that the scattered, inadequate protein intake that might have worked at 40 becomes utterly insufficient at 65. Your body needs concentrated, complete protein sources that can deliver maximum nutrition with minimal digestive burden. The pharmaceutical and supplement industries have capitalized on this knowledge gap, pushing expensive protein powders and pills while completely ignoring whole foods that are naturally superior. They've convinced us that nutrition is complicated, that we need their processed products to age successfully. Meanwhile, foods that have supported healthy aging for centuries sit ignored in our grocery stores, their incredible protein profiles unknown to the very people who need them most. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of this deception is how it's normalized gradual decline. We've been conditioned to accept muscle loss, fatigue, and increasing frailty as inevitable parts of aging. But population studies from cultures with dramatically different protein sources tell a different story. In regions where people consume these overlooked protein powerhouses, rates of age-related muscle loss are significantly lower, and independence is maintained decades longer. The research is clear, the science is solid, and the foods exist. What's been missing is the knowledge to connect these dots. Knowledge that could mean the difference between thriving in your golden years and slowly surrendering your independence. The 10 foods I'm about to share represent more than just superior nutrition. They represent a roadmap back to strength, vitality, and the confidence that comes from knowing your body is working with you, not against you. The moment I walked in my neighborhood Kroger with Dr. Martinez's list, I realized I had been living in a nutritional desert disguised as abundance. Aisle after aisle of processed foods, rows of supplements promising quick fixes, and there I was searching for 3 simple whole foods that had been hiding in plain sight all along. What struck me wasn't just that these foods existed. It was how invisible they had become in a culture obsessed with the next superfood trend while ignoring the protein powerhouses sitting right under our noses. Standing in the dairy section, I picked up a container of plain Greek yogurt and felt something shift inside me. At 10.3 grams of protein per 100 grams, this wasn't just marginally better than eggs. It was fundamentally different. The straining process that creates Greek yogurt removes the liquid whey 3 times, concentrating not just protein, but transforming it into something your aging digestive system can actually handle. I thought about Margaret, struggling with the chalky protein powders her physical therapist had recommended, when this whole food alternative had been sitting in every grocery store in America, priced at 15 cents per serving. The research behind Greek yogurt's effectiveness hit me like a revelation. A landmark study following 2,000 seniors for 2 years found that those consuming just 20 grams of dairy-based protein daily maintained 23% more muscle mass than their peers. But it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the quality of life those numbers represented. These weren't people measuring their progress in laboratory tests. They were grandparents who could still lift their grandchildren, individuals who climbed stairs without fear, people who maintained their independence because they had accidentally discovered what researchers now call predigested protein. Moving to the canned goods aisle, I found myself staring at rows of chickpeas with entirely new eyes. These humble legumes, priced at under $1 per can, delivered 11.2 grams of complete protein per 100 grams while providing something eggs could never offer: the anti-inflammatory fiber that actually protects muscle tissue from age-related breakdown. The Framingham study's 18-year tracking of 3,000 adults revealed that regular legume consumption reduced muscle decline by 25%, not through some mysterious mechanism, but through the simple act of feeding beneficial gut bacteria that directly influence muscle protein synthesis. What moved me most was imagining the thousands of seniors shuffling past these cans every week, reaching for expensive protein bars and supplements, never knowing that this ancient food contained magnesium for muscle contraction, fiber for gut health, and plant compounds that actively fight the chronic inflammation slowly destroying their strength. Here was a food that had sustained civilizations, now relegated to the occasional chili recipe, while Americans spent billions on inferior protein sources. But it was quinoa that truly transformed my understanding of what we've lost in our pursuit of convenience. This small grain, available now at Target and Walmart, contains all 9 essential amino acids in perfect proportions, something achieved naturally through thousands of years of cultivation in the Andes. At 14 grams of complete protein per 100 grams when cooked, quinoa doesn't just match eggs. It surpasses them while providing minerals that support bone density and cognitive function. Standing in that grocery store, holding these 3 foods that cost less than $20 combined, I felt a profound sadness for every American over 60 who had been convinced that maintaining strength required expensive supplements, complicated meal plans, or accepting inevitable decline. These weren't exotic superfoods requiring special ordering or breaking the bank. They were accessible, affordable, whole foods that have been systematically overlooked by a culture that had forgotten the simple truth that real nutrition comes from real food. The tragedy isn't just individual, it's generational. We've created a society where the very foods that could preserve our independence are considered specialty items, while processed alternatives that weaken us have become a norm. But walking out of that store, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope that the path back to strength wasn't complicated, expensive, or out of reach. The deeper I ventured into Dr. Martinez's list, the more I realized I was entering territory that most Americans had never even considered food. These weren't just ingredients with higher protein numbers. They were nutritional powerhouses that had been feeding strong, vital populations for centuries while we remained trapped in our processed food culture, slowly weakening with each passing year. My first encounter with pumpkin seeds at Trader Joe's was nothing short of revelatory. Holding that small bag, I discovered I was looking at 19 grams of protein per 100 grams, nearly 3 times what eggs could offer. But the real story lay in what scientists call the mineral trilogy of zinc, magnesium, and iron, working in perfect harmony to support muscle protein synthesis, energy production, and recovery. Research from the Journal of Nutrition followed seniors who consumed just 1 ounce daily for 12 weeks and found a 28% reduction in muscle inflammation markers, the very inflammation that had been silently destroying their strength for years. What struck me most profoundly was how these seeds represented everything we had lost in our pursuit of convenience. Here was a food that indigenous peoples had treasured for its life-sustaining properties, now relegated to jack-o'-lantern waste, while Americans spent fortunes on synthetic supplements trying to replicate what nature had already perfected. The irony was devastating. We were throwing away one of the most complete protein sources on Earth while our bodies desperately needed exactly what it offered. But it was tempeh that truly challenged everything I thought I knew about aging and nutrition. This fermented soybean cake, found in the refrigerated section of health food stores, delivered 20 grams of complete protein per 100 grams while harboring something revolutionary: live probiotics that fundamentally change how the body processes protein. The fermentation process didn't just preserve the soybeans. It transformed them into something that could actually repair the damaged gut microbiome that prevents so many seniors from absorbing nutrients effectively. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition study that followed this connection haunted me for days. Researchers found that older adults with healthier gut bacteria retained 18% more muscle mass over 1 year, even when their protein intake was identical to those with compromised digestive systems. This wasn't about eating more protein. It was about creating the internal environment where protein could actually do its job. Tempeh wasn't just food. It was medicine disguised as a humble fermented bean cake. Then came spirulina, a blue-green algae that challenged every assumption I had about where powerful nutrition could come from. At 29 grams of protein per 100 grams with 85% bioavailability, this ancient life form contained more usable protein than most meat sources while providing phycocyanin, a compound that reduced inflammation and improved blood flow to muscles. The 2021 study in Nutrients that showed 24% strength improvement and 31% better endurance after just 8 weeks of consuming 1 teaspoon daily felt like discovering a secret that had been hidden in plain sight. What moved me most was imagining the millions of Americans dismissing these foods as too weird or too complicated, while their muscles slowly wasted away from protein deficiency. Here were foods that had sustained human health for millennia, now viewed as exotic curiosities while we reached for processed alternatives that actively worked against our body's needs. The cultural shift required wasn't just dietary. It was a complete reimagining of what real nutrition looks like. Standing in that health food store, surrounded by these ancient foods that modern science was finally validating, I felt the weight of knowledge that could transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. These weren't just protein sources. They were lifelines to independence, strength, and the possibility of aging with dignity rather than decline. The transformation that followed didn't happen overnight, but it began with a single profound realization. Every meal from that point forward would either build my strength or allow it to slip away. There was no neutral ground, no maintenance mode, only the daily choice between vitality and decline. The 30-day protocol DR Martinez outlined wasn't just a diet plan. It was a systematic reconstruction of how I understood my relationship with food and aging. Week 1 brought an unexpected emotional reckoning. Replacing my lifelong breakfast ritual of eggs and toast with Greek yogurt mixed with hemp seeds felt like betraying decades of habit. Yet within days, I noticed something remarkable. The afternoon fatigue that had become my unwelcome companion began to lift. My energy levels stabilized in a way I hadn't experienced since my 50s. It wasn't dramatic, more like a gentle awakening from a fog I hadn't realized had been clouding my days. By week 2, as I incorporated quinoa and pumpkin seeds in my routine, I began to understand what researchers mean when they talk about muscle protein synthesis. My body wasn't just consuming these foods. It was actively using them to rebuild tissue that had been slowly deteriorating for years. The simple act of substituting quinoa for white rice at dinner became a nightly investment in my future mobility. Each meal felt purposeful, intentional, like I was finally working with my aging body instead of against it. Week 3 brought the most profound shift. Adding tempeh and spirulina to my diet wasn't just about increasing protein numbers. It was about addressing the deeper issue of absorption and utilization that had been sabotaging my efforts for years. The fermented foods began healing my gut microbiome, creating an internal environment where every gram of protein could be effectively used. I found myself standing straighter, moving with more confidence, rediscovering physical capabilities I thought I had lost forever. The final week, incorporating aged Parmesan and dried fish powder, represented something deeper than nutrition. It was a complete philosophical shift toward foods that had sustained healthy, aging populations for centuries. These weren't modern inventions or processed supplements. They were ancient wisdom validated by contemporary science. The dried fish powder, initially intimidating with its unfamiliar texture and origin, became a symbol of my willingness to embrace foods based on their nutritional merit rather than their familiarity. What struck me most profoundly was how this transformation extended beyond physical strength into emotional resilience. The fear that had haunted me since Margaret's fall, the terror of losing independence, of becoming a burden, of watching my body betray me, began to dissipate. Each week brought measurable improvements. Jars opened more easily, stairs climbed without hesitation, sleep deepened and became more restorative. These weren't just physical changes. They were proof that I had agency over my aging process. The monthly shopping strategy that emerged became a meditation on long-term thinking. Buying quinoa and hemp seeds in bulk wasn't just economical. It was an act of faith in my future self. Planning weekly meals around these protein powerhouses forced me to think beyond immediate gratification toward sustained vitality. The emergency protein stash I maintained became a safety net against the processed food culture that had nearly claimed my independence. But perhaps the most transformative aspect was the community that formed around this knowledge. Sharing these discoveries with other seniors, watching their own transformations unfold, created a network of people who refused to accept decline as inevitable. We became living proof that the right nutrition could restore not just physical strength, but the confidence to live life fully, regardless of age. This wasn't just about individual transformation. It was about reclaiming a fundamental truth that had been obscured by decades of nutritional misinformation. Real strength comes from real food, and the power to age with dignity lies not in expensive supplements or complicated protocols, but in the simple wisdom of nourishing our bodies with what they actually need. 6 months after that life-changing conversation with Dr. Martinez, I stood in Margaret's kitchen watching her prepare lunch with steady hands and confident movements. The woman who had once faced the possibility of never living independently again was now teaching her granddaughter how to make quinoa salad with hemp seeds and Greek yogurt dressing. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was a complete reclamation of her future. What we discovered together goes far beyond protein numbers or nutrition labels. We learned that the difference between thriving and merely surviving in our later years often comes down to information. The kind of knowledge that empowers us to make choices that compound over time into either strength or weakness. Every senior who walks past those protein powerhouses in the grocery store, reaching instead for familiar but inadequate options, represents a missed opportunity for independence, vitality, and dignity. The 10 foods I've shared today aren't just ingredients. They're tools for rewriting the narrative of aging in America. From the accessible trio of Greek yogurt, chickpeas, and quinoa that you can find in any grocery store, to the elite performers like spirulina and dried fish powder that deliver pharmaceutical-grade nutrition without the pharmaceutical price tag. These foods represent a fundamental shift in how we approach our health after 60. But perhaps the most profound lesson isn't about specific foods at all. It's about the courage to question conventional wisdom, to seek out information that serves our actual needs rather than industry profits, and to remember that our bodies are incredibly resilient when given the right fuel. The protein deficiency that's silently weakening millions of American seniors isn't inevitable. It's a choice we make every time we shop, every time we cook, every time we decide what deserves space on our plates. The path forward isn't complicated, but it does require commitment to learning, experimenting, and sometimes embracing foods that challenge our preconceptions about what constitutes proper nutrition. These foods have sustained healthy, aging populations for centuries. They're simply waiting for us to rediscover their power. Your independence, your strength, your ability to live life on your own terms. These aren't luxuries that some people are lucky enough to maintain. They're the direct result of daily choices about how we nourish our bodies. Every meal is an investment in your future self, and now you have the knowledge to make those investments count. Which of these 10 protein powerhouses are you most excited to try first? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your insights might be exactly what another member of our community needs to hear today. And if this information has opened your eyes to new possibilities for healthy aging, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue creating content that could transform lives and preserve independence for seniors across America.